that the revival that the Lord is bringing out of Charlie's death, I think, is more than we would have ever seen from the rest of his life of living. And that's the goodness of God.
Totally.
It's not because God planned this. It's because of God's goodness. And the problem is that if we get sucked off into these little side stories, I truly believe it is hijacking from what God is doing. And it's hijacking us from seeing something that I never thought, I'm going to be honest, genuinely never thought I would see revival like this in my lifetime.
Yeah.
The message is don't question everything. That's
Sure.
not the message. The message is question things that need to be questioned. And not everything needs to be questioned. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to With All Her Mind. This is episode 3, and it looks different today for multiple reasons. One is that things are not like dialed in with my set yet, so things are going to look a little bit different every week, no matter what, until we get that dialed in. And then the other reason is that we have our first guest this week. My favorite guest, my favorite person in the whole world. It's my husband, Chris Kuehl. Yes, a round of applause from everyone. I'm really excited to have him because he's kind of an expert in some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Today we're going to be talking about Charlie Kirk.
Yep. Which I'm not an expert.
He's not an expert in Charlie Kirk, but
Yeah.
we're going to talk about some things as it relates to Israel. And that is what I would say you are an expert in.
We'll see.
Yeah, you are.
That's
You
true.
are. Am I allowed to talk about your project?
Yeah, you can talk about that.
Okay. He is basically just finished writing like a massive book about Israel. And I would definitely say at this point, with all your research and everything, you're somewhat of an expert. I think you're an expert.
I appreciate that. And I'm excited to be here today.
It's kind of fun, right?
It is very fun. And I know you're going to say this, but I have to say it before you say it so that you know it came from me.
Wow. Let's hear it.
Which is that I know you're going to do a different show about this what you did this last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And you were at Lila Rose's event, the
Live action
gala. And I just want to say how proud I am of you and how amazing it is. I just love that you're so passionate about this project. And as I was seeing photos, I was like, I am so proud that this is my wife.
That's so sweet. Oh my gosh,
So,
thank you.
anyways.
Thank you for saying that. Well, okay, before we dive into the main part of today's episode, we have to talk about what I'm reading. Okay, and in full transparency, I'm not reading this right now. I read this a couple years ago. That's how some of these book recommendations are going to go. But it's a really good book. And so I was like, I've got to talk about this one today. So today's book is Subverted: How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. And it's by Sue Ellen Browder. This book is really part of what woke me up to a lot of what's going on in the world, specifically as it relates to feminism. And a lot of people, I think, when we talk about feminism, they think that we're talking about something that just relates to and affects women. But I actually think I know feminism has a much bigger reach than that. And it affects all of us. It affects our children, our husbands, our fathers, our cousins, everybody. Everybody is affected by it because it's something that is so a part of our culture today. So I definitely recommend this book.
It's a great cover.
It's a really, really good place to start because it's not philosophical at all. It's a story. And so the story like keeps you on your toes the whole time. It's really, really engaging. So even if you're like, I am not the type to go read like about feminist philosophy, this is the book for you. And you'll learn so much, but in a narrative form, which I think is always helpful.
Totally.
So that's my book recommendation for today. And now we're going to go in the future. I'm actually going to have another segment. I've decided to add another segment, which is going to be just mostly positive news of what's happening for women in the world, trying to focus on good, happy things. We're not really going to get into that today because we have so much other that we're going to be covering. And we're also going to be talking about some things that I would feature in that segment today, which is Erica Kirk. That's who I would talk about. That's
nice. That's cool.
Really what's in my mind. So we'll be talking about her anyways throughout the course of this episode. But before we get into some of the...
It's called The Lie Heard Around the World.
Oh, I like that. The Lie Heard Around the World. Before we get into that, I want to share kind of like my personal connection to Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA and just some things that I really admired about him, how he impacted my life. And I'd love for you to share some of those things before we get into the drama. It's not really drama, but I mean, it kind of is.
It kind of is.
Yeah, and I didn't really like prepare comments about this, so hopefully I'm like succinct, but I'm just going to speak from my heart about this. So I became involved with Turning Point USA after Actually, it was during my year as Miss Tennessee USA. So I was Miss Tennessee USA 2020. And after Miss USA, I felt so betrayed by the organization. I had spent years competing for Miss California before I competed for Miss Tennessee. And the state organization in Tennessee was run like just so wonderfully and like honorably and all those things. So this is not to speak against the people here. The national organization and the like I'm not gonna, I don't know if I can say the name, so I'm not gonna say it, but the national and the international organization that headed it definitely had like they had opinions about what was happening politically in the world, and that's all I'm going to say.
Yep.
It was during the election year. That's what I'm going to say. I felt
you probably had the hardest year in 2020. There was so much
Yes.
being stirred up that year, like being forced to post certain things, just the whole,
and not even, I would say like not forced,
like
but
soft
like,
pressure,
yeah,
soft pressure.
coursed through like social pressure.
Yeah.
And so it was a really hard time of me really battling. How do I stay true to myself and my values while also representing the entire state of Tennessee, who doesn't like, they don't all have my value system. They don't all believe the same things as me. So it was like very emotionally and mentally exhausting for me. And then to feel like I'm just going to say how I felt. I felt very betrayed. I know many of us felt that way after Miss USA. And so I went to one of my friends who was a title holder with me. We went through Miss USA together. And I said, I just want to go to a turning point event. I'd never been to one before. I had watched Charlie Kirk for years. And he was definitely one of the voices that was a part of my journey out of being like kind of a left-leaning Bernie supporter into being somebody who really cares about truth. And so I just told her, I was like, I really want to go to a turning point event. And she was like, I'm friends with Erica Kirk. Actually, she wasn't even Erica Kirk at the time. I'm friends with Erica, his girlfriend. And so Erica is the one who brought some of us title holders in that year and welcomed us and gave us VIP tickets and allowed us to become influencers or ambassadors for Turning Point USA, even though like I didn't meet the requirements. I didn't have a big enough following. And she made that happen for us. And I remember just my interactions with her. I was like, she was kind of like a mystery to me because she is such a strong, as we've all seen now, just such a strong woman, so unshakable in her faith. And so that's how I was brought in was through that. And then I didn't have like one-on-one personal interactions with Charlie at all, but in group settings, they would do Q&A and I was able to ask questions and things like that. And I just had so much respect for him because him and I are the same age. And I felt like he was about a million years ahead of me, a million years older and wiser and all those things. And I just really appreciate the fact that it reminds me of the verse in Timothy where it's talking about not letting people look down on you because of your youth. And it's so true. When God has a message and a call for you, your age doesn't matter. Either direction. You can't be too old or too young for it. Like the Lord will work through it. And so, I have my years being a part of Turning Point USA and being an ambassador for them were some of the best years of my life, like socially speaking. Obviously, like there's nothing more rewarding than being a wife and a mother. Like those are the best things. But the other part of my life, like those are the highlight for me, are those events and those friendships that I made. And just the first time that I went to an event, I cried because I didn't know that there were still so many people who like cared.
Shared that value system. Yeah, totally.
And so for me, Charlie's passing, I know for all of us it's felt very personal, but that is like the personal connection for me. Like
it's good.
It felt like this is like a person who's so pivotal to everything that I care about in life. And even me being the kind of wife and mother that I want to be, because I was very like kind of into some woke stuff and I left that. And a lot of that was his influence and people that he impacted whose voices helped change me. And I'm just really, really thankful for that. So that's kind of things that I'm really thankful for in my personal connection with Charlie.
That's great.
What about you?
Well, I'm going to start with something that Dennis Prager said when he was giving a eulogy for Charlie Kirk. Now, Prager has really, he took a fall last year and he's been greatly diminished in terms of his physical capability. So he wasn't actually able to go to the memorial. But he says something. He's on a
ventilator.
Yeah, he's on a ventilator. But he was one of the three people that Charlie Kirk talked about as being the most influential thought leaders in Charlie's life. So they were Dennis Prager for talk radio, Ben Shapiro for hosting and TV, and Jordan Peterson for thought leadership and authorship. Wow. So those were his three.
Can you get a little closer to your mic? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm wondering if it just...
So Prager talked about this in his in his eulogy. And one of the things that he said is that you never know how tall a tree is until it falls.
Mm.
And so I think that that's really true with Charlie. I think like for me, I had a very incomplete picture of who he was. He was, you know, the debater, MAGA, young, you know, like that was just kind of how I saw Charlie. I didn't really, I'd never really looked into Turning Point. I didn't have a connection to Turning Point. And it was not probably till a few days after his assassination that I was like, just kind of floored at like who he was, you know? And one of the first things that really moved me was what Erica said about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of like becoming the new high water mark in terms of like how I judge a man is what does his wife say about him? And then what do his kids do? You know, on this front. And so when she was talking about, you know, his ability to go into a Shabbat, for instance, you know, you're talking about a guy who's running a $100 million organization. He could be busy 90 hours a week, but he's learning now how to like put that on pause to be with his family. She talks about how she never didn't feel loved by him. He never raised his voice at her. There were all these kind of things that was like, wow, this is like, that's like amazing. You know, I mean, you know, and you look at many on the right who are kind of morally bankrupt. There's just a void there, you know, and you could tell Charlie was not that guy. The second thing was just the absolute excellence that he built his life with, you know. And I'd heard this. I did a men's event that we ran a couple of years ago, and we had one of the main fundraiser guys from Turning Point who came to this event. And he was talking about how Charlie just goes into his room and he listens to classical music and he just studies like all night. And, you know, I was thinking just like, okay, that's like, you know, this guy's super committed, but everything he does is excellent. And that's amazing. You know, like that's like, as a man to observe that, that's a very, and to be able to marry family and excellence in your work, like that is to me like a heroic effort, you know?
It's really the work of the Holy Spirit.
Totally. And so, you know, just all of that and his pursuit for truth, you know, there's this kind of famous quote that says, you know, the last attributes of a dying society are basically apathy and tolerance. Mm-hmm. And he was not apathetic and he was not tolerant. You know, he was not tolerant to untruth. He was loving, like in his response. But so all those things were kind of the things that I took like after just learning more about who Charlie was and, you know, really being affected by just this public assassination on this incredible man. So that was kind of where like my heart went as the dust settled a little bit with this. So yeah, I think that's kind of what really stood out to me.
That's so good. Yeah, I think those are really, really true things. And I would just encourage any of you who haven't watched Erica's speech at the memorial to watch it. And I know this show is specifically like for women. This is a good episode to have your husband watch too, though. And I would say husbands and wives, or even if you're not married, because many of you are not, you will benefit from watching her speech. And just, it's like a case study on the life of a believer, just that speech. Yeah. Okay, so pretty much immediately after we got the news about Charlie, which I was in my group chat with my Turning Point friends, and we were just grieving together immediately. Just
I don't think anyone believed it.
No, we didn't. And we had to get like basically first and secondhand accounts from our friends to believe what had happened, because we just thought, I don't know, we were just like, let's keep contending, let's pray as much as we can. And but I came to you like that day, and I think what I said was like, babe, we need to be emotionally prepared for them to pin this on Israel, because that is there is such a movement on the right now to make everything about Israel and to demonize Israel, that we need to be emotionally prepared for that and like ask the Lord for wisdom and how to respond to that. Yeah. And I would say that's kind of like what we're doing today.
You saw that in a way that I did not see. You know, first of all, we were down in Peru when we heard this, and we were both like exhausted. And I feel like I didn't see that coming to the same degree that you saw it. I mean, there's always going to be a segment of both the right and the left that just, they are going to demonize Israel and the Jewish people until the day they die. And that's just how it is. But I was kind of shocked at all of the people that ran into this and started just like, you know, it was like, it all of a sudden just turned into like the Jew hating Olympics, you know, like who can do this the biggest and the best. And I was a little bit surprised to see that. So I don't know, we can dive into that a little bit if you want to talk through that.
Definitely. I want to hear like kind of your fingers on the pulse with all of this. And so some people watching might not even be aware that that's been happening. Right. You know?
Well, you know, so the first thing that I saw on this was a guy named Harrison H. Smith, who is kind of like a low level InfoWars guy, as far as I can tell, there's no connection between him and Charlie. Like, they didn't follow each other on social media. There was no like cross posting. Charlie has been very vocal about his kind of, he detested InfoWars and like Royper and
Yeah, I was
Fuentes.
going
Like,
to say
these
he
communities
really
were
distanced
not.
himself from them.
So this idea, first of all, this guy comes out, he makes this post, probably 4 weeks ago, that Charlie is worried Israel is going to like kill him or take him out. So I think probably at the time, like, everyone was like, this is, like, this is crazy. Like, why would he do that? But again, one of the things that's kind of amazing to me about this is how everyone always has these unnamed sources.
Yeah.
I have this friend, I have this guy that knows Charlie. We do, like, there's clearly no connection between us, but there's just an unnamed source who's saying that Charlie is fearing for his life, So this is kind of like the first thing that I see is by this low-level InfoWar guys that's getting thrown around, and now everyone's starting to say, oh, it's Israel's the one that took out Charlie Kirk. And then the next big name I see is a guy named Max Blumenthal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most people probably don't know who Max is. I've been in the Israel game for like 20 years now. So Max has been a steady figure in this, and that he is. So first of all, he's the son of a guy named Sidney Blumenthal, who was a big part of the Clinton Foundation. He was part of, he's basically single-handedly the reason why we went into Libya and did all of what we did down there. Max, his son, is a super, super left-wing Jew who is a rabid anti-Zionist. Like, he's very, he's very partisan, I would say. He gets on Tim Dillon's show and he accuses everyone else of being kind of like a Netanyahu cutout, which to me is like so ironic because he's just the polar opposite of everything he's accusing these people to be, and he has a long history of like, just, he's just very, very vocal about his anti-Zionism. And he, what's interesting about Max is, he runs a Substack-y website thing called The Gray Zone, which was hacked last year. And it was revealed that he's been taking money from Iran and from Russia. And so this is not even like, you can go read about this like in any major news.
Not
Surprise,
really.
exactly. So, but so I already know, like, when he's coming out with this, like, it's going to have like a certain feel to it,
And can we pause for 1 second? Because I think sometimes even the word Zionism, people like have a reaction
it's like
to.
the pariah word right now.
Yeah. And also, I think you're still a little far from your microphone. I'm sorry.
Well,
you got to have it like next to your mouth.
all right,
Okay.
is that good?
That's much better.
All right.
Okay. So tell me if I am sharing this correctly, but Zionism is the belief that the Jewish people have a right to exist in their homeland. And that's pretty much it. That's
yeah,
the extent of it.
It didn't even actually mean like the homeland of Israel originally. It just meant the Jewish right to have a home, essentially. So we don't have time to dive into all that, but that's essentially at a very basic level.
I think it's important to say that because we're not saying that it means that you think that the government of Israel is perfect or that you think Netanyahu is like the greatest thing ever.
Right.
It just means that we believe that they have a right to exist. They have a right to not be exterminated from Earth. I think that's a pretty good basic Christian view.
Yeah, that's basically that's basically like what that belief means, and you can extrapolate that into a lot of things. But so Max goes on Tim Dillon's show and does this whole long thing about how Charlie was feeling pressured. Apparently, there was some turning point event with a bunch of influencers up at Bill Ackerman's home in the Hamptons, and this is going to become important later on. But long story short is that Matt kind of drops this whole like hour-long thing about how Israel is pressuring Charlie and they're offering all this money and these things are happening. And so, again, this comes from unannounced sources. Like, this is not a source that Max is willing to go public with. There never is that. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a feature of all this stuff, is that there's no one's willing to put their face behind any of this, which is always a tell, I think. So anyways, it ends up that this guy named Xavier Del Ruscio, I don't know how to say his last name, was Max's source. He was this guy who was at the event. Max called him. And so Xavier does this whole long post of like, I had no idea who this guy was. He was asking me all these questions. Like, he's totally misinterpreting like what I'm saying. He basically like kind of denounces everything that Max is reporting.
Wow.
Then Seth Dillon, the CEO of the Babylon Bee, comes out and does the same thing. Bill Ackerman does the same thing. Everyone's like, Bill Ackerman wasn't even like one-on-one with Charlie anymore. We were all in like a group setting, So, and then Andrew Colvett, which is Charlie's best friend and host of the Charlie Kirk show, comes out and says like, this never happened. So basically you've got this tweet that was made from some unidentified source, that says this about Israel. Then Max kind of comes out with his story. It gets like platformed really on Tim Dillon, which is where it really starts to go like, And then all these kind of other like, poorly cut clips over the last year of Charlie's speaking are kind of thrown into the mix with
Totally
all
out
that.
of context.
We'll talk a little bit about that. So basically I don't even think that Max's story, even by himself, is standing anymore. Like it's been so destroyed that I think that that's kind of out of play at this point. But this is the hallmark of everything that's happened in this point is that people have all these stories, but there's no evidence. There's no one willing to put their face behind it. There's no one. It's all basically like hearsay, and the hearsay is coming from a fringe InfoWars like host guy who hates Israel. Like he's openly about that. And then Max Blumenthal, who's an anti-Zionist left-wing Jew who's been in this for 20 years.
Would you say that like InfoWars side of things is kind of like what would be called the alt-right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, one of the things that's interesting that's happening right now is that there is a massive split that's happening in the right now. And a big issue on that is the issue of Israel.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of splintering. And Charlie was very aware of this. He talked about it. I mean, we'll talk, we can get into that a little bit.
When you read Netanyahu's, the letter he wrote to Netanyahu, you see that.
Very, very clear.
And
so
even for me, that's part of why I wanted to do this episode, because I see that the enemy is trying to bring division always, of course. But in this situation, I think it's really, really important that we have a lot of discernment. And there's a lot of just feelings-based, reactionary kind of stuff going on. And I really wanted to bring the viewers some helpful information in processing this.
Yeah, hopefully. So, another thing that I've been thinking about is, I think it was Mark Twain that said this, but he said, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets its shoes on. And so what this is really revealing to me, and I've kind of been watching this and seeing this, is how ready and how excited people are to pin something on Israel.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if there's evidence, doesn't matter if there's proof. Like, they're so excited. They're like rabid excited about that idea. So now this whole thing kind of jumps to the main stage with Candace Owens. Now, this is, we'll talk a little bit about how this happened, but essentially, I don't even think it was a day after Charlie passed when, Candace Owens comes out and starts basically insinuating that Israel is the one that has killed Charlie.
And before we get into stuff about Candace specifically and Tucker, I also want to make sure that we remain clear that we're not saying that Candace and Tucker are the enemy or something like that. The enemy is still Satan and the demonic, right? But I don't want to speak for you, but for myself, I can say I believe that they are partnering with the enemy's plans on this. To what extent are they aware of that?
Yeah.
To each their own on deciding that. But I know that many people watching probably like Candace and like Tucker because in the past they have spoken up about issues that matter.
Yeah.
And there has been a big shift. I have to say there's been a big shift.
Yeah.
In over the last year, particularly with both of them. And the messaging is very concerning, and that's what we're gonna kind of talk about. But I don't want you to feel alienated if you're like, well, I like them. Give us a chance here.
Yeah.
Hear us out.
Yeah.
We're not saying they're the enemy.
No, definitely not. I think we can maybe like kind of give our analysis on all this when we go through it. But it was kind of amazing to me that Candace jumped right into this. It was like less than 24 hours. And actually Ruslan did a great piece on Candace Owens.
Ruslan is a big Christian influencer
YouTuber,
kind of,
which I recommend everyone goes to watch that episode, because he's not even really,
we can link that down
he's
below.
not even really connecting it to Israel. He's just pointing out all of the clear and open lies that Candace Owens has made. And he's basically just saying, like, how many lies does someone have to make before they become like an untrustworthy source?
Yeah.
And again, this is not even really related. I think he had like 1 or 2 points in there related to the Israel thing. It was mostly related to other stuff that she was doing. And I'm sure he's taking heat from that, because everyone's like, oh, we're just asking questions. We're just like, we're just trying to get to the bottom of the...
And so that's what he says too. He says, I'm just asking questions
how
back.
many times do you have to openly lie before you become like
a liar,
an untrustworthy source? So it's like, so this is all happening. Ruslan also made the comment that I thought was really interesting, was that she probably made over 7 figures in the streaming of these 3 programs that she had about Charlie Kirk. Now you can go watch all these in your fullness. I recommend doing that if you're interested in this. They were all still up as before we started recording this. Yeah. So they've been clipped to death on the internet. So I can't imagine that even taking those down at this point would do her any good. So, but you can go watch all that. So she had 3 main things that she said that we're gonna talk about. So first of all, she accused Bibi of offering Turning Point and Charlie specifically $150 million.
And also, did she accuse or did she insinuate an accusation? Which it doesn't really matter, but I know that people are going to say like, oh, well, she didn't directly, maybe she did. But what Candace does is she insinuates. So that I think, I'm not saying it's intentionally to cover her booty, but it might be. And so we want to just...
I'm not going to say that she straight up said that Israel shot Charlie Kirk, but she was massively insinuating it.
Yes.
Candace is amazing at playing this game where it's basically heads she wins and tails you lose. So what I mean by that is this idea that she'll come out with some wild statement, okay? Now, if you respond to that, what she's going to do is she's going to escalate that. And she's going to, look, we've got him on the run. He's responding to it now. But if you don't respond, then she's going to be like, well,
why aren't you responding?
Why aren't you responding? So you can't, it's like trying to disprove a negative. It's like impossible. Like, how do you she is super clear in her, she's very much insinuating that Israel shot Charlie Kirk.
But I know some people are going to say...
I know they will. But she absolutely says that Netanyahu offered Charlie Kirk $150 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Then she goes on to say that Charlie was getting ready to convert to Catholicism. Okay.
She does say that. She did not insinuate. It was clear.
And she says it in this super offensive way, like he's too smart to be a Protestant. Okay. Now, I have no problem with Catholics. I love Catholics. Catholicism produces amazing theology. If Charlie was literally in a place where he was like, this is where God is calling me, like I would be super stoked on that. Like I'm not someone who
we don't have a problem with him becoming Catholic.
What I have a problem with is the clear lie that's in that. Okay. Now we're gonna, I don't know if we'll play something in this video, but you can go watch Michael Knowles and Charlie debate about Catholicism. They have a very loving relationship. And, I think it was a month before Charlie passed away. He produced actually a 3-point video on why he would never become Catholic. And it was a really clear video. Like it was, Charlie's a thoughtful person, when it's not like so it's just something to put in the mix in terms of how you're viewing what Candace is saying.
Yes.
So then she accuses, the third thing is that she accuses Bibi of misrepresenting a letter that Charlie wrote him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now this I found super interesting, even before what happened last night happened, which is that this letter became public. Okay. So when I first heard her say that, I was like, that's crazy to me. Like Charlie's in touch with like a prime minister of a nation, and we're supposed to believe that he's like passing this letter to Candace before it goes to Bibi, as if he's like running it by Candace. What do you think of this letter? Should I send this to Bibi? Like, how would you have any idea, Candace, what's in this letter? So all this was just kind of like stirring at the point. So I think it's worth adding that there has been no evidence that Candace and Charlie were even connected in the last 18 months. And then people started saying, well, Candace is still on the website for Brexit, which was
Brexit.
I thought it was Brexit.
You're thinking of the British one.
Yeah.
Brexit is the black exit from the Democratic movement.
Got it. Okay.
So if you look on the website, she's been on there. They've never taken her off this whole time. She wasn't added back, which was an accusation that some people were making. Yes, they changed her position on the website to CEO, but they didn't update any of the bios. They didn't update Charlie's bio. Nobody's bios are updated. Right. So it's not... It still says that Candace is the host of the Candace Owens show on the Daily Wire. So that was like some evidence that people were trying to use that.
Totally.
See, look, Candace is right. They added her back to the website. They're like subconsciously trying to tell us. I was like, no, girl.
But I would imagine that a lot of that stuff is contract based when things get signed, and that you have a certain, term that stuff has to stay public. So,
and Turning Point has made it very clear their position. But they've done it indirectly. They haven't mentioned her at all. But they've had one of their main podcasts is the Cultural Apothecary with Alex Clark. Mm-hmm. And she has had multiple, it's all the guys from the Charlie Kirk show. I can't remember their exact positions, but they're like the CEO, or no, that's the CEO of Turning Point Action and the COO and a couple other, they're all the highest people in Turning Point USA besides Erica. Come on. And she's asked them, without saying Candace's name, the things that Candace is making accusations about. And they have clarified that those things are not true.
Right. So Andrew Cole, the guy who's basically the second in charge right now, he ran the Charlie Kirk show. He was the producer there, and he was Charlie's best friend, has denied that Netanyahu ever offered money to Turning Point at all, And so, where this came from, it's just unbelievable to me that Candace would know something that these people don't know. It also, so first of all, Turning Point would never take foreign money. They didn't even take PPI money when from the U.S. government. Like they don't even take U.S. gov money. And so on one hand, we're supposed to believe that Israel is like this super intelligent thing, but on the other hand, they wouldn't know that like they couldn't offer these things don't make sense, So I want to play this clip though from Charlie where he's actually asked about Candace Owens, and I think that this is a great clip.
Yeah.
First of all, let Charlie speak on it,
Yeah.
and he actually has a very loving response while saying, I disagree with Candace on Israel. I disagree with her on a host of things. She's got some fun opinions. So just what he says, but he doesn't like slander her in any way.
Yeah.
That was really Charlie's way. And I love that about him. So we're going to play this clip real quick.
Relationship with Candace Owens nowadays.
She's a great friend. Look, I don't agree with everything Candace says, but you know what I don't do? I don't stop being friends with people just because people morally blackmail me. I don't do that, and you shouldn't either. Look, I have different views on things as Candace. I have different views on Israel than Candace. I have different views on a lot of geopolitics. But honestly, I traveled the country with Candace. I went to her wedding. I saw her meet her husband. I went to Israel with Candace, which is a fun story I'll tell you at some point. But what I don't like is when people demand, you must stop being friends with somebody. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's a left-wing tactic. Don't do that. I'm not saying you do that, but other people do that. We should never resort to that. In fact, if you believe what I believe, shouldn't you want me to be friends with people that don't agree with us? Shouldn't you want me to also be a tool of influence? And so I think the world of Candace. She's a great mother. She certainly has very, very fun opinions at times. And she's a great talent. She says a lot of stuff that sometimes I don't agree with, but that's what makes our relationship and our friendship interesting. My advice to all of you, you might not like somebody, but never tell somebody like me to stop being friends with somebody on an interpersonal level just because of disagreement. It's bad. It's what the left does, and we should rise above it as conservatives. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really gracious and charitable response. And again, I want to be really cautious, even with us as we're calling her out, that we're being charitable, but that we're also really clear about matters of truth. Yeah. So again, we're not trying to make personal attacks against Candace, but we are trying to be very clear about areas where she's lied. We're not gonna...
Doesn't fly.
Yeah, we're not gonna be passive about that.
So one of the things that I liked, about that video, first of all, that video was on August 21st. So that was like... Wow,
very recent.
Very recent. Very recent. Okay. He is clear. I disagree with Candace on Israel. He's very charitable. I can't get over, she's got some fun ideas. To be, it's like
such a great way
like
to
you talk about
that.
your little boy. You're like, he's got some fun opinions. He's running around the backyard. He's just like, but I want to now, I can't even believe that I'm going to do this, but we're going to watch a Nick Fuentes clip.
Oh my gosh.
The provocateur.
Is my show going to lose all credibility? Just kidding.
But what's great about this is because they're all kind of aligned on their, like, the hatred of the Jew, like this whole...
We want to be very clear. No, we don't like Nick
Fuentes'
messaging.
No,
we pray for him.
I disagree with all of it. He's going to talk about some things here that I just think what's interesting to me is that all these people that are kind of aligned, even among them, they can see what happened here is not true. So I'm actually trying to use their voice against them, if that makes sense. So I want to show this clip of Nick Fuentes real quick, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
All she did for the past week was gaslight the public, and by definition, that's what it is. Gaslight her audience, gaslight the public. Netanyahu lied. They shot him in the throat because they're taking his voice. I have all these receipts, but I'm not going to publish them. And then literally a week later, she's going to put on Twitter, oh, I never said they were behind it. I never said that at all. I just strongly implied it. We all know what you said. We all know what you meant. You dummy, you irresponsible, grifting dummy. I've so had it with that. And at the end of the day, she's just stupid and defines low IQ anti-Semitism. I used to think it didn't exist. I used to think that low IQ anti-Semitism is just something that Jewish people would say to counter the rising tide of people acknowledging Jewish power. Now I'm convinced it's real. And it has a name. That name is Candace Owens Farmer. Low IQ anti-Semitism. The idea that Charlie Kirk was silenced for being about to go against Israel, it's just, on its face, absurd and ridiculous. And so anyway, all those people that said, oh, Nick got the call, Nick's really afraid right now. Believe you me, when we get back to our regularly scheduled programming next week, when we have processed everything having to do with this horrific assassination, rest assured, we will be talking about the Middle East conflict. I have not changed my views even slightly, not even in a minute way, not at all. The idea that Israel's number one cheerleader on the right wing was somehow killed by Israel, sorry, not buying it. And the people promulgating that idea, they're not even saying that. Tucker's not saying that. Candace isn't saying that. They're just weirdly implying it. And I wonder why that is. Releasing no evidence. And I would reiterate, this is the last thing I'll say before we move on. You know, Candace Owens made a very specific claim. She said that Charlie Kirk sent a letter to Netanyahu, and she said that Netanyahu held up that letter when he eulogized Charlie Kirk in the news the day of. She said, and he mischaracterized the contents of the letter. She said, and if he keeps doing that, I'll reveal the letter. You need to reveal the letter. Show us what you have. Once again, if you have any integrity at all, or if you care at all about your journalistic credibility, you have to release the information.
I hate basically everything Nick says. But I agree with his take on Candace here. He talks about Tucker. Similarly, I actually think that he has some very good points on Tucker. And Tucker talks about Nick. And I think Tucker's right about Nick, which is funny. I think that they're all like, you know, there's something going on there that we can talk about maybe at some point. But anyways, I think it's interesting that even to someone who is committed to hating the Jews, committing to hating Israel, can still see the obvious lie of what's being told here. That's what was interesting to me about it. Was to use someone who would normally so want this to be true. And even they're like, there's literally no way. Like it doesn't even make logical sense, okay?
He's basically saying that Candace and Tucker are so obviously wrong about this that it's hurting his anti-Semitic movement.
Right, exactly.
Because he's like, now they're going to lump me in with you.
With how crazy you guys are being.
Which is just
Which is, I mean, it's quite a take, but at least he's like a good faith, low IQ anti-Semite. Like that's literally like he actually, I think, kind of fundamentally believes this to some degree.
Yeah.
Like he's a good faith hater.
Yeah.
Where, you know, I think that the others could be, there's probably other terms that would maybe work there, it would not work. But so anyways, then Tucker Carlson, you know, picks this up. And I think there's a couple things that are important to know about Tucker and his new network. The first one is that, you know, his network took $15 million from a guy named Omid Malik, who is a Pakistani Iranian business guy. You know, there's a group called Loomer 8, which is a nonprofit that's been funding like $180,000 a month to that network, which is why he just did a interview with the what is it called, the Emir of Qatar. I was yelled at once for saying this wrong. Qatar.
I just say Qatar.
Yeah, it's definitely not that. Anyways, so you know, he did this video recently that you and I were both amazed, where he was talking about how great Sharia law is. And I was like, dude, what is this? Like, what?
If we can find it, we need to put it in here because it's like
it's just like.
But you should know, Seth, that the real danger is Sharia law. Sharia law, and you can tell when you go to a place like Abu Dhabi or Riyadh. Like, oh man, I hope we don't ever wind up with a society like this, with a rape rate of 0, where you leave your keys in your Lamborghini and don't ever worry about it being stolen. And, you know, if people want to get wasted, they do it at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't.
Boy, I hope we don't wind up with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, I mean, Sharia law is obviously just a punchline. I don't know that too many people actually believe in the reality of that. And I mean, sure, like I said, you know, I'm a lawyer. I actually studied legal philosophy.
Right.
Sharia is not that different from other legal codes. A lot of our own legal code, the Anglo-Saxon common law, Anglo-American common law, derives ultimately from religious authorities.
It's so great that the rape rate is 0 and I can leave the keys in my Lamborghini, and you know, like that would be the worst thing for America if we had Sharia. It's like, okay, dude, like where is that coming from? So, you know, anyways, Tucker picks this up, and I want to just be really clear. Like there's 3 things that he says as well. The first thing was that he says that Charlie Kirk hated Bibi. Okay. Then he goes on to say that Charlie Kirk was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. And then that above all, that Charlie Kirk was resentful that Bibi was using America to prosecute his war. Okay. So those are 3 clear statements. We can play that clip. But when I heard this, I was like, dude, this is like peak projection. These are all things that Tucker believes, but let's be clear. First of all, I don't really know or care particularly what Charlie's position on Bibi was. Like, I'm not a huge Bibi fan. Like, there are a lot of criticisms that you could probably make of Bibi that I would think are legitimate.
And you don't have to think that Israel's government
totally
is perfect in order
I don't think
to
my
be
government's
Zionistic.
perfectly. I still think America should exist. It's like,
yes.
So
yes.
anyways, like, I'm not really like invested in how Charlie saw Bibi one way or the other.
Israelis are critical of Bibi.
Yeah, 50% at least. I think actually when I was writing the book at the time, Bibi was only polling 20% positive in his whole nation.
That's
so if you don't
good.
like Bibi, like, you're squarely within Israeli society. Like, it's totally, there's nothing like crazy about not liking Bibi. So, I'm going to let that one go. People were posting clips after this showing all the positive things that Kirk had said about Bibi. I don't know. I don't really trust clips that are clipped really short like that.
Yeah.
You don't get context. So I'm not going to play any of those. And I don't really care what Kirk's opinion on Bibi was. But
yeah, it's irrelevant to
totally
the arguments here.
So, one of the things that he said that I think was really interesting was that he said that he was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. Now, the last full clip that is on Charlie Kirk's Twitter is his defense of what Israel is doing in Gaza. And he tells this joke where he's like, I used to argue with these college kids who were like homosexual and they were like, they loved Hamas. And I would say, well, it used to be that Hamas would take you to the tallest building and then, they would push you off if you were gay. But now there's no more tall buildings in Gaza, so they can't do that anymore. So he's like making this joke about the leveling that Israel has done in Gaza. And then he goes on to say, if you don't like that, you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims. So it's kind of like this idea that this is a joke that Charlie's made within like the last 6 weeks of what Tucker's saying here. So again, it just goes back to this, like, there's literally no evidence. And I'm sure that, like all of us, Charlie's like appalled by violence and by but he's not ignorant to the reality of war. He's not ignorant to who started this. He's not ignorant to why this is happening, So I think that all of that kind of plays into just what Tucker's saying here, even though there's mass amounts of evidence that it's the exact opposite of what he's saying. And then kind of the third thing he says where, Charlie is appalled that Bibi thinks he can just use America like this. Again, you go back to a clip that was recorded a couple weeks ago. It's someone basically asking this question, like, how can you be America first and still support Israel? And Charlie's like, well, to be America first, does that mean that you have to be America only? Mm-hmm. And, of course, this kid thinks that that's exactly what it means. But Charlie's like, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe that to be America first, I have to be America only. Okay, I should prioritize America. That doesn't mean that I can't have friendships. That doesn't mean I can't have relationships. We can't have partnerships with other nations, mm-hmm. which is a totally reasonable response to this. So, I think that, again, when Tucker's saying this, especially with this letter that just came out that was written from Charlie to Bibi, it makes all of this stuff just look like either Charlie is
grasping.
They're just so grasping. Either Charlie's like a total liar, which one of my favorite quotes that he said was that it's important to be the person in the shadows that you are as the person in the light. Mm. So when you're on a stage, it's important that whatever you present there is who you are. So kind of this idea that like, okay, these people have access to some part of him that's not true, that he's going on. It just seems very, very unlikely to me. Mm-hmm. So you basically have these 4 or 5 big voices that have kind of gone on, and then all the, this kind of anti-Semite right thing that's happening right now have picked all this up, and they were just going wild with it for the first week. Many of them have kind of realized that there's nothing here and that this has faded a little bit. And they kind of pieced in these 4 or 5 clips that, personally, I think that they were clipped incorrectly. I went back and I watched the full interview on all these because I was very curious, like what was being said. And it's a shame that like you have to do that in today's world. Like you can't even trust what you're seeing because it's probably missing really important context. Yeah. So there were a couple things that Charlie has said over the last year, which I think I like that. To me, I like that he asks questions. I like that he's very concerned about the truth. He got a lot of heat for having this guy, Dave Smith, at Turning Point to debate. He got a lot of heat from his pro-Israel side. And, that's a bummer because there's a lot of great people that could debate Dave Smith really well. I think the only problem with that was that he didn't pick one of the guys that was really good at debating Dave Smith. But, he was all about like letting competing ideas go at it and let's talk about this stuff. And so, you can definitely see at times like he's got just like how do you process this? Those questions are really good. So, to kind of answer the idea that maybe he didn't like Bibi. I don't know. I don't see any reason to defend or not to defend that particularly.
Yeah,
Like
it doesn't
that's,
really matter.
you know,
And not even if he didn't like him, it doesn't mean that he didn't like him because he thought he was going to kill him.
Totally. It's a complete jump to go from one to the other. I've liked one president in my adult life as an American. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like what, where, why do we care? It's so weird. And so, okay, so that was one question that people were throwing around. They were trying to pass this clip around, even though there's a bunch of clips of Charlie talking about how great Bibi is.
And in the letter, you can see.
And in the letter, you can see the massive amount of respect.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was another thing that's really, I think people don't understand. I think they, you know, especially the people that talk about like quote unquote the Jews, they see them as this like monolithic thing, you know, like it's just this, you know, they're all the same. They all think the same.
Which is crazy if you've ever met any
like
Jews.
Contrasting things about them. On one hand, they're the socialists. On the other, they're the capitalists. They're a nationalist to the social justice left-wing people. They're, you know, a globalist if you think about George Soros. So like they can fit whatever you hate, the Jew can perfectly fit that if you're this kind of person that thinks this way. So, you know,
which part of the reason is because you can find a Jew who exemplifies anything that you're looking for.
You can find a Gentile that believes anything. That's just how it is.
But Jewish people are also, I would say, particularly diverse.
Totally.
It's actually something really cool about Jewish people is like.
And Israel, it's like you go there and there's Jews from everywhere, you know, and so it's like with all sorts of different beliefs. So, you know, people were posting around clips of him, you know, talking about left-wing Jewish influence. And that's the thing that made the Bill Ackman thing so interesting was because Bill Ackman was one of the ones that probably because of Charlie and the MAGA movement and Trump stopped funding Harvard and some of these big, like he's a big Jewish billionaire who has been predominantly left-wing. And now he's funneling a bunch of money into the right. And so it's very likely that because of Charlie's advocacy, because of their connection, even because of what's happened with the MAGA stuff over the last 2 years, that he's switched from this left-wing position. So you have stuff like that. You have, at one point, you know, someone clipped what he was saying as a mandate for ethnic cleansing in Gaza in a way that I think totally took the context out of what he's saying. But anyways, the bottom line is like, I think that it's not like for someone to have questions about something does not mean that they're like radically shifting their position on something, you know, like that's just, to me, that's the sign of like intellectual growth.
It's like saying that someone is getting a divorce because they had a disagreement about something.
Yes.
It's like it's jumping to a pretty crazy conclusion based off of something that's very normal.
Yes. And it's totally possible to have disagreements with the Israeli government and still like not think that the Jews shouldn't exist in Israel.
Yeah.
And so I want to play this clip from Dennis Prager. That's what I kind of referenced at the beginning, but Dennis Prager is kind of responding to this thing that came out about, you know, were Megyn Kelly and were Charlie, were they being pushed, you know, by certain specific Jewish influence. One of the things that I found really interesting as well that Andrew Kolvot said, and this was in his podcast that he did with Alex Clark, which the cultural apothecary, I think is what it is.
Cultural apothecary, culture apothecary.
Whatever it is. So, you know, he's talking, he's like, you know, we don't even get that much funding from the Jewish people, like at all, even like the American ones. That's a misconception about our funding base. So I wouldn't actually be surprised if some of this pressure that Charlie was getting could have even been from like more of the church, like the Christian Zionist supporters in the church, you know? So this idea that it's like, it's Jewish specific or Israeli at all, you know, Andrew debunks that idea, but then also really is like the funding that was even coming in is not even heavily Jewish, you know? And so he says this kind of publicly. So anyways, all this to say, you know, I think Dennis Prager has a really beautiful way of talking about Charlie and, you know, what he's done on behalf of Israel. And this has earned him the right to ask questions, you know, to be against certain decisions that the Israeli government makes. Like that doesn't make you, that literally puts you squarely in Israeli society if you don't like something that the Israeli government's doing. That's how many of them are, you know. So in the same way that's how it is here. So let's play that and then we can go from there.
If you think Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk have been anti-Semitic, you're out of your mind. Charitably, you're paranoid. And Jews have a right to some degree of paranoia, given what's happened to us. But I don't excuse it. These have been two of the most outspoken pro-Israel voices. They are allowed to differ with the Israeli government. Half of Israel disagrees with the Israeli government. I have watched both of them in their outspoken defenses of Israel, which unfortunately takes some courage today on the right. There are a lot of voices that are anti-Israel. There were voices on the right that were anti-Semitic in William Buckley's time, and he, to his great courageous credit, publicly rebuked them. It took a lot of courage. Courage is the rarest of the good human traits, as I always point out. There are a lot of good people, but there are very few courageous good people. I would only say to Megan and Charlie, in fact, I had every desire to call Charlie to talk to him about this. You can't say the Jews anything. George Soros is a Jew, and Benjamin Netanyahu is a Jew. Do they have anything in common? Absolutely nothing. One is on the right and one is on the left, and therefore they have nothing in common. Hitler and the Nazis would say Jews were the inventors of communism, and Stalin would say that the Jews were the inventors of capitalism. So you can't both be right. You can't say any group, the Americans, the whites, the blacks. It doesn't work.
I know you said you wished you called Charlie to say what you said. I texted with him and I spoke with him this summer, but you could say something to Megyn Kelly. Would you like to?
Before my accident, you would have me on, and you were very generous in what you would say about me, and even say about me when I wasn't on. And I would likewise speak highly of you and mention you were one of the few regular podcasts I'd be watching. Since my accident, a major way I've kept up with the news. Are Jews defenders of Judeo-Christian values or the antagonists? The answer is some are one and some are the other. I have nothing in common with left-wing Jews. Nothing. And they have nothing in common with me. So please, for the sake of Western civilization, for the sake of America, for the sake of truth, don't take these comments from these Jewish fools, whoever they are, as indicative of the Jewish people. They're not.
Reminds me, we have so many friends who are Israeli who live in Israel because you lived there for a while. It's a country that both of us love and enjoy visiting and care for. And it's funny because when we talk to them about the state of the right and as it relates to Israel right now, they're like shocked.
Yeah.
Because they have no problem with disagreeing with their government. They're like, yeah, we don't like this thing that Benjamin Netanyahu said either. Like, we don't like that either. But we still have a right to exist. And I think the problem in the United States right now is that there isn't any nuance to this conversation anymore. And I think that's part of what Dennis is talking about in that video. It's like, you actually can, when you love someone, you should be the person criticizing them because you have a vested interest. Part of you is invested in them. And so it's not from a critical position, it's from a position of love and caring. And I really think it's very obvious, especially after reading. Honestly, I'm so glad they released the letter because that letter, it made me feel emotional because it was so beautiful. You can see that Charlie loves Israel and he loves the Israeli people and he loves so much of what they're doing and what they stand for. But he's also like, guys,
we need to fix some things here, you know? And that was the other thing that Andrew, you know, his best friend talks about in that podcast was how he thought that the PR coming out of Israel was abysmal. And that's true. It's always been bad. But I really think it's because the Jews don't really understand the conversations that's happening internationally or here. I think in some ways they've just kind of like given up trying to convince people of their right to exist, of their right to be. And they just kind of don't care. It's like, you know, like, so I don't know why that is. You know, people have, in my view, a completely wrong idea of aspects of the Mossad and IDF, and they have these very grandiose, like mythical strength opinions on what these organizations can do. I think that they would be surprised at what the actual truth is, but that's not really the place to go into this. But I do think that as kind of a final thing, I'm going to just play this video then from Charlie Kirk's pastor. And he just he produced this, or he came out with this a couple days after Charlie's death. And so this is what he says.
You know, there's discussion about his views on Israel. What I can tell you is that Charlie believed, and I was with him in Korea. It was the last trip we took. It was last week. And he was wanting me to go to Israel to start a work there. That was his request of me. And I know that he believed the Jews had an ancestral right to the land. He believed that Jews are God's chosen people. He believed in the sovereignty of Israel. He also believed Ezekiel 37, that there was to be a political nation first and a spiritual nation second. And so he would be accused of being an anti-Semite because he would separate that you can question the political government of Israel, but you stand with the realization that the Jews are God's chosen people. They have an ancestral right to the land. But you can also, like we do with our own government, call them out when they're wrong. And I was on a text stream with him and Orthodox rabbis and Orthodox believers, and he would lay this out. He would lay it out, and he would glean from that, and then you'd be on the other side where he's trying to understand, Tucker's position and everyone else's, because he was trying to build the bridge for young people 18 to 30 that were non-traditional conservative voters.
Right.
These are kids that were sick and tired of watching their peers die in the 1040 window in the Middle East in wars put forward by the industrial war complex, and to see them dying in villages and hamlets of the names they couldn't pronounce, and then abandon them and come back and they're still the walking wounded because they've got PTSD, they've lost friends. And what did they fight for? And they leave billions and billions of dollars in American equipment. They were disillusioned, a distrust for the government.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what Charlie always pushed.
Yeah.
Don't let your distrust of government exceed your trust in God. It's okay to question, but trust the Lord.
So what do you think of that, babe?
I want to hear what you have to say about the theological part, because that's really where you are an expert, and I think
well,
it's significant.
I think what's important about what his pastor said, what I found interesting, was when he talked about Ezekiel 36 and 37, which is a major, like when I hear someone talk about that, I know that they've thought about this in a deeper sense. Charlie was a much deeper thinker than
most people.
Well, most people, but also just like, the Genesis 12 verse of like, if you bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. Like he wasn't going to give you some Ted Cruz.
He wasn't a low hanging fruit.
No, that's right. And so, when I hear his pastor say that, I know that this is someone who's deeply thought about these issues, who had a theological framework for what he believed. This wasn't just like him and his wife took a trip to Israel. Now he loves Israel as like a tourist destination. Like he has a strong foundation and belief about Israel. So I found that very interesting, what kind of the pastor was giving the nuance to this belief. This is a belief that Charles Spurgeon had, J.C. Ryle, Charles Hodges, many of the people in the Reformation are talking basically. I know what he's saying, and what he's connecting it to is these beliefs that these men had. So anyways, that was kind of, when I saw that, I had a pretty strong sense that like everything that was being said about Charlie in relation to this is not true.
Yeah. That's that makes a lot of sense. Makes me excited about your forthcoming book. You guys got to stay tuned. We got to have you back when that comes out.
We will. But anyways, just kind of wrap this up. I think this letter that came out was really. I agree. I love the spirit of it. I thought it was super beautiful. You can really hear Charlie in it. You can hear his concern about all these things, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if people try to say that this is a fake or forgery or any of that.
I'm sure they'll say all kinds of things. I'm sure.
Like it's such a nail in the coffin to this whole narrative that it becomes hard to save face, I think, anymore in the light of this. But I want to just talk for a second what your thoughts are. Like, do you feel like we're in like a post-truth era? I was kind of really surprised I shouldn't be surprised because I see the sentiment that's happening online. But were you surprised at how quickly this got picked up with no evidence?
No.
No.
And that's actually something I'm going to talk about a little bit, sort of connected to in my next episode. But I'm going to be talking about nihilism and just the two extremes that I think people are living in now. One is the nihilistic, fear-based way of living, and the other is in love. And even as Christians, we can get sucked into what I call like functional nihilism, which is that we say we believe that God is in control. We say all these things, but the evidence is not there in our lives. And, the reason that I wanted to have you on to talk about this today is because God is doing something through what happened to Charlie. Scripture talks about like, in order for there to be a harvest, a seed has to fall on the ground and die. And that really is what I believe what we've seen happen with Charlie. And I call it like the thriftiness of God, or like God's economic principle.
I love this idea though that you were sharing. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, because when I by no means do I believe that God killed Charlie Kirk. Okay, let me just put that out there.
Or that was part of his plan.
No, or that's his his perfect will at all. Okay. That's not his perfect will. But God in his brilliance and his mercy and his grace causes all of these things to work together. That's his promise. He causes
that was Charlie's
all
favorite
things,
verse, which is crazy that
he had just shared
Yeah.
that in his last interview. How that's his favorite verse. Yes, that God causes all things to work together for those who are in Christ Jesus.
Mhm.
And what's incredible is that the revival that the Lord is bringing out of Charlie's death, I think, is more than we would have ever seen from the rest of his life of living. And that's the goodness of God.
Totally.
It's not because God planned this. It's because of God's goodness. And the problem is that if we get sucked off into these little side stories that Tucker and Candace and some of these others are spinning, I truly believe it is hijacking from what God is doing. And it's hijacking us from seeing something that I never thought, I'm going to be honest. Some of you will think this isn't great, but I genuinely never thought I would see revival like this in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And that was okay with me somehow. And now that I've seen it, I'm like, never mind.
Yeah.
Lord, we want this. And we need to let what happened spark something in us, that a light in us that will not go out.
Yeah.
And even I wanted to talk about, one of the other stories that's going around, the other lies that's going around is that Erica is like a lizard person, or that she was Charlie's handler,
Totally.
or that she's responsible. That is absolutely okay. I don't want to be like hurting people's feelings who have thought this and from good faith position, because we can all get sucked into storylines that are not true from a good faith position. That's just not true. It's just absolutely not true. My interactions
Could you imagine having
with
to deal
Erica,
with that? Like,
no.
I can't even like this era of time in the world. I don't want to interrupt you. Is going to be studied at some point.
Yeah,
for
people are
like
gonna be like,
all like the crazy things that are being passed around.
I mean, it
right
reminds me of the Red Scare
Yeah.
with communism back in the day, where everybody was a communist and people had to anyways, we won't go into that. But Erica, as soon as this happened, my first thought was thinking about Erica. And again, I didn't personally know her. I had some interactions with her and I had heard her speak many, many times over the years. So I had a good idea of the type of person that she was just from that. And I was very impacted even from my little bit of interactions with her. I immediately knew how she was going to respond to all this.
You said that when we were in Peru, and I was like, yeah.
Which I felt morbid saying that, because I'm telling you, this is like within 15 minutes of this. I told Chris, I was like, the way Erica responds to this is going to be like really, really significant. Yeah. Sorry, this can make me cry.
And I remember thinking as we were talking about this, I don't know. I have this feeling that Erica's going to bring that shooter to the Lord. I really do.
I still think we should be contending for that and praying for that. But when Erica, just immediately the next day when the pictures come out and her husband's coffin is being carried by and she's praying and she's holding up her necklace with her cross and just reminding people of the truth during those moments. And then, of course, her speech the next day and then her speech at the memorial. We are getting like, that's like the disciples of Jesus level of like, again, I've said this before, but a case study on like what it looks like. Yes, a witness of what it looks like to live as a Christian.
Yeah.
She forgave him, and people are criticizing her that she's not sad enough, which is absolutely insane. She is clearly sad.
Being on that show is probably the most hopeful thing she can do in her life right now. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I want to add more about that, because it's not just that it's also when you are grounded in Jesus, when you're grounded in him and he really truly is your strength, then you can actually be brokenhearted and stay the course.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is that most of us have never seen healthy grieving in our lives.
That's
before.
probably very true. One of the things that was so clear, and I feel like it's been clear for a while, even just at the memorial, it was very clear to see which of the leaders are dialed into the Lord in like a real way and which ones are not. Like this did something that if you weren't sure before, like it's really clear now, like who is functioning in the Spirit.
And not to shame anyone, because I also think that we saw people experience a conviction about that. I mean, Vice President J.D. Vance came out and shared how this is essentially causing a personal revival. I'm putting words in his mouth, but that's just to sum up what he was saying. It's essentially causing a personal revival for him. But I want to come back to that idea that most of us have never seen healthy grieving before. Okay, most of us have seen the two extremes: people who stay in denial and they never really interact with it, which is clearly not what's going on with Erica. Erica is able to talk about this. She's not in denial at all. Okay, and then you have the other extreme: people stay angry, or people get hopeless and they kind of lose their minds. And to watch Erica grieve has been healing for me.
Yeah.
And I even am sure that my experiences around grief have been much healthier than many other people's, you know? And so I think that the Lord, again, it comes back to like that idea of the Lord's economy, his thriftiness, is that he is showing people how to walk through grief with him by watching Erica. So again, this is why we cannot get sucked off into these, you know, they are, I don't want to use the word conspiracy theory because I know that is sometimes used to like silence, you know, true things. But this is like you know, these are theories that are not true. They're theories that are, I think.
When did people start just believing something because they see something on the internet? Like for real, like it.
And we don't, it's also the message is don't question everything. That's not the message. The message is question things that need to be questioned. And not everything needs to be questioned, actually. Like question everything is not actually like a great.
No, it actually feels very like, you know, the postmodern idea that like nothing is true.
It's so true.
Like,
so true.
oh, we can believe nothing. Everything's a psyop. Everything's a conspiracy. Well, what ends up happening is then you have no truth. Like you have no foothold for anything.
Yeah.
And you know, I shared that quote with you earlier from that period in Germany that was like, you know, the point of all of the information and the lies and the whatever it is, you know, is not really to get people to believe one thing or the other. It's to get them to believe nothing at all so that you don't trust anything.
Yeah.
And people that can't trust anything, the people that can't trust their own eyes, the people that can't trust what they read, that they hear, then no longer knows how to make right and wrong decisions because everything is moving and shaking and opaque and it's clear.
Or you start going in, you can go nihilistic, or you can start going into like, well, I can only trust my feelings.
Yeah.
And people put a name to that.
Totally.
They put a name to that. They might call it intuition. Some people actually blame it on the Holy Spirit, and really it's just living from your feelings because you don't know how to reason.
Yeah.
Which is why I wanted to start the show.
Totally.
Because as men and women, but you know, my audience and primarily geared towards women, it is so important that we know how to reason, that we know how to navigate this world. And of course, we are again also not saying that everything is just exactly how it appears.
Totally.
You know, there's nothing to be questioned. There's no corruption. We are not saying that at all. We do not believe that. Like we absolutely think that you do need to question many things. But this question everything thing is not
it's
helpful.
Really something that happened in 2020 and has carried over. And so, you know, it is something that I feel like is actually, first it becomes your own box. Like if your whole thing is like question everything and nothing is true, that becomes its actual own limitation. That's its own framework of way of seeing the world that you've now just pigeonholed yourself in. But I think it's extremely destabilizing with reality, within reality. And so
true.
To me, it's like, I don't care what your pop theory is, like who's the person with discernment that has understanding and truth about what's going on. And I think that's one of the really important reasons to stay spiritually minded and spiritually focused, because you have to be able to look over all the noise and just figure out like, what is God doing? What is God saying? What is true? So anyways, I really appreciate being on the show. And
Babe, thanks for coming.
I love you.
I love you. We got to have you back when your book is out, because
I appreciate it.
I think this is probably going to whet a lot of people's appetite for like, oh, you're talking about Israel and you actually sound like you have some good information on this, because again, I think that's one of the things that's been happening recently is people don't even know what information to trust about Israel. And I think your book is going to be such an incredible resource for people. And I'm excited to have you on. I've really been enjoying reading it. He will send me a chapter after he writes it. So it's not even edited and it's still so good.
I appreciate that, babe. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Biggest fan.
It's true. I am your biggest fan. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope that it encouraged you to question the right things, but not everything. And I just would encourage you to go watch Erica's 2 speeches that she gave if you haven't watched them yet, and just ask the Lord to convict you of places where you need conviction, and to, you know, maybe that's in your relationships, maybe that's in your marriage, maybe that's in your waiting for marriage, maybe that's in your response to political things. Maybe it's, I mean, a huge thing that I was convicted about was forgiveness, because I'm like, I feel even stupid that I had a hard time forgiving anybody after that, which maybe I shouldn't feel stupid, but it convicted me. I was like, yeah, I actually need to be much better at forgiving. Anyways, so I really think you guys will benefit from watching her speeches. And we will be back in 2 Wednesdays from now, and I'll be talking about my weekend at the Live Action Life Award Gala. It's a lot of words. And I'm going to be talking about the pro-life movement, but I'm going to be talking about it from a perspective that I don't think I've heard anybody talk about it yet.
excited.
So I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Also, don't forget, you can drop your questions down below and I'll answer those at the end of an upcoming episode. Thanks so much for watching.